Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on renewal marketing strategies. The webinar is brought to you by Renewed, the open network for specialized subscription membership and event professionals. My name is Kim Matus, and I'll be your host for today's event. During today's presentation, everyone should be on mute, please. If you're unable to hear or see the presentation, or if you have any other technical issues, just private message me through the chat in Zoom, and we'll try to take care of you as best we can. If you have any questions for today's speaker, you can submit them throughout the presentation and then at the end during the live Q&A using the chat function. After the presentation, you will have access to the slides and the recording at renewed.net/resources, and you will receive an email once it's posted. We also encourage you to share takeaways from this event on your social media using #Renewed. Now on to today's session, I'd like to introduce you to Greg Wolfe. He is the president and founder of Four String Media, a magazine services agency that he launched in 2020 after several decades of owning and operating first Circulation Specialists and then going on to be the president at National Publisher Services. He's an expert on audience marketing and management across a wide variety of publishing models, including newsletters, national and regional consumer mags, BPA audited trade magazines, as well as paid websites and digital magazines. So we are very grateful to have Greg with us. And with that, Greg, please go ahead.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. Let me share my screen. Does that look good?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks, Kim, and it is great to be here, and I appreciate you joining today. As Kim said, I've been working with publishers on subscription marketing and subscription renewal for many, many years, and so I've got a lot of information today that I'd like to share with you. So let me start by just giving you a quick rundown on the topics that I'm going to cover. So I'm going to start with analyzing renewal data, which is obviously really critical in your renewal marketing. And then I'll discuss the elements in the renewal series. And let me just say, sort of by way of background, that this presentation comes pretty much from consumer print magazine, is sort of the basis of most of what I'm talking about. But the principles, I think, certainly apply across other types of publishing, and I will be talking to some degree also about email and digital content and all of that stuff as well, because that's such an important part even of sort of legacy consumer magazine publishing these days. So go into the different elements in the renewal marketing program: the schedule and timing of efforts, pricing and offers, creative, including sort of key copy platform that are important to use, copy lines that are important to use in renewal marketing. I'll touch on gift subscriptions, which are a little bit different when you go to renew them. How to think about and analyze the number of efforts that you should be using in your series, in particular the mailed efforts, because of the cost, and how to figure out what the right number of efforts is. And then also for the mailed efforts, talk a bit about generic stock, which is very popular these days, versus custom stock, and how I think about that. So starting with data and analysis, wanted to just touch on this concept of source migration. And so source migration is when a subscriber moves through different sources during their journey year to year and contract to contract. And as they renew, They may get different prices, different creative, different numbers of renewal efforts. New business sources usually get lower prices and fewer efforts. Renewal sources start to get higher prices, which I'll talk about in the pricing section, and more efforts.
Hey, Greg, sorry to interrupt. We're getting a little bit of comments that the audio is not great. I'm not sure if your microphone, if maybe you can readjust it, or if there's another input option. It's just sounding like a little grainy or difficult to hear. Sorry.
I don't know. Well, I could try a headphone option. Do you want me to try that? If that's clear.
Yeah, that might work a little bit.
Might be worth it. It was even better when you just responded. It was clearer.
You know, Ed, if I'm closer, does that help? If I'm just closer to the, because I am a little bit away from the laptop.
I think it does.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's better.
A little better.
Okay. Yeah, let me know if you're having trouble hearing, and I'll try to be a little more, just a little more volume too. Talking about source migration, just to finish up that concept. So the subscriber tends to start their journey in the new business source, such as direct mail or email, and then migrates to a conversion source, and then migrates to a renewal source. So that's just sort of a fundamental of the way we think about a renewal analysis and looking at renewal data. When we analyze our renewal data, what are we trying to accomplish with that? We want to understand the business, are our renewal rates matching industry benchmarks? If not, why? Are renewals tending to trend down, which is not a good sign? Maybe there's a problem that we need to address. We also use analysis for planning for rate-based needs. If we're delivering rate-based, looking for other trends, spotting inconsistencies and problems. So report layouts for renewal data are all designed with these things in mind to help spot problems, trends, inconsistencies, and best analyze data. And so we set up our reporting by source of business, by effort, marketing effort in our renewal series, identified renewals coming from our renewal series, unidentified renewals, advanced renewals, and regular renewals. And I'll talk a little bit. I've got a slide about some definitions, which I think is helpful. Is this is the volume okay now? Can you guys hear?
Yeah, it's better. I think it's when you get further away from the microphone pickup area, it gets a little so.
Okay. Well, I'll plow ahead then. Terminology that I'm going to be using in this section. Original expire is the largest size that the expire, the pool of expires attains. Regular expire, the group at the point where we start mailing our renewal series promotion. RABs, renewal at birth, is when we upsell somebody right from an invoice from their original subscription. Identified renewals is the renewals that come from a renewal promotion, mailed or emailed. Unidentified renewals is when we get an order for an existing subscriber, but it comes from a different source, like an insert card or an agent or direct mail. Advanced renewal, we use that term to mean renewals received prior to mailing the first effort. And regular renewal is when the renewals that we received after we start our renewal series. So just to get a little terminology, here's sort of a basic layout. This is the direct mail source, and you can see efforts down the side of the page, and we're looking at our mail quantity in the first column for each effort, how many renewal orders we're getting, what our response rate is, and then a total response rate and a total response for the total mail quantity. So that's sort of a basic way that I'm analyzing my renewal efforts, and that can be, as you see here, mailed efforts and email efforts and attached efforts. All of that needs to be tracked and looked at. And you can see here another thing that's important when you're looking at a renewal analysis is that generally you want to see that the first effort is producing the highest response, and that the response rates are then trailing down as you get deeper into the series. If you're not seeing that type of a curve, that could indicate that there's a problem somewhere along the line. And then just the same report, but so obviously you want to look at all your expire groups. So Feb, March in this case, April, May, then you have the June, July, August, September, and so forth, and then totaling it up to see by source. So in this example, your direct mail source, what's your total for the year of expires? For insert cards, the next source, what's your total for the year? And then I tend to also analyze by subtotaling by groups of sources. So new business sources, direct to publisher sources, I would subtotal. Agent sources, I would subtotal. And then people that have renewed before, we tend to subtotal that as well, and look at it in all of those different ways. So long-term renewals, I wanted to just point out, is a place that we focus, because the customers that have been with you, that have renewed 2 or 3 times, it's important to watch those groups in particular. A deterioration of these rates could indicate a red flag, could indicate an editorial problem, could indicate some other type of problem. So focusing on those long-term customers is critical. So I want to just touch a little bit on unidentified renewals. I mentioned it in the definitions. Renewals that don't come from your renewal series, such as RABs. 2-for-1 gift offers are a very common way to get unidentified renewals. Agents, insert cards in the magazine, white mail, all of these generate unidentified renewals. They extend an existing subscriber's subscription for another term, another year or more. And so just wanted to show an example of how I analyze, I like to analyze when I'm looking at unidentified renewals. And so this report gives you a view of your total retention, including your marketing from your renewal efforts, plus your unidentified renewals coming from those other sources. And that's important to understand how many customers are you really keeping on file for a particular source, for a particular expired group, etc. So the way this is laid out is you can see you've got your original expired group, which I mentioned before, your regular expired group, your RABs coming in. You've got identified advanced renewals, unidentified advanced renewals, identified regular renewals, unidentified regular renewals. So hopefully some of that terminology that I went through, you can understand this a little bit better. Advanced meaning before the renewal series starts, regular meaning after the renewal series starts, unidentified from other sources, identified from meaning from the regular renewal series promotion. And so some things to think about when you're analyzing your renewals in this way is if you had a source like that had a lot of bill me orders, like insert cards tend to have a lot of bill me orders, you could expect a higher RAB rate because you're sending out more invoices, and so that could be a factor in the renewal rate for that source. If you're looking at an agent source, you would probably expect to see a lot of unidentified renewals coming back. People that subscribe through agents tend to renew often through the agents rather than directly through the publisher, through the renewal series of the publisher. So you can see in this example on the total line, we've got some RABs, that make up a chunk of the total renewal rate. We've got identified advanced renewals. We've got unidentified advanced renewals. So that could be if this was an agent source or there were some agent sources in here, those orders coming back through the agent. And then the identified regular renewals, in this case, 61,828, that would be primarily from your renewal series. So the like the report I showed previously that was just focusing on the renewal efforts, this quantity of renewals would be from that, and then rolls up into the totals, the total number of renewals across all those categories, and the total renewal rate. So in this case, we're retaining 62% of our customers one way or another. They're staying with us. So, and then I wanted to touch just briefly on auto renewal data. Auto renewals, obviously, we're analyzing it in a different way than fixed term renewals. So these are just some of the metrics that we use when we're analyzing auto renewals. What's the size of the auto renewal pool that is up for renewal? How many link letters were we successful at delivering to notify the subscriber that the subscription was expiring and that we were going to charge the card again? How many cancels do we get back from that link letter notification where people are saying they don't want to continue? How many cards do we attempt to charge? How many successful charges do we get? How many cancels do we get after the card is processed? And what is our net renewal rate? So that's a little bit of a different analysis. So that brings me to the second section here, which is the elements of the renewal series. So the renewal series, the main elements are emailed efforts, mailed efforts, tip-on and attached efforts, and phone efforts. That's what we would include in our marketing. So starting with mailed efforts. So mailed efforts generally produce the majority of the responses, even for customers that you have an email for. And usually we're using a two-color outer and a laser image form like this as our primary elements. Email is an important part of the series. It's obviously cost effective compared to mailing out efforts through the mail. Tends to produce a lot less renewals than the mailed efforts. And one reason is that most of the publishers don't have email addresses for a lot of their customers, usually less than half. And so we need to use other ways to reach those people to renew them. But when we have an email on file, a good email, sending these email renewals is important and makes a big difference in the overall renewal campaign. So for emails, tend to keep the messaging simple, the copy short. We want to click through to an online renewal page that's pre-populated. We want to use credit card auto renew, and this is a great way to take email renewals is a great way to take people that are currently not in auto renew that have a fixed term subscription. Maybe they came through direct mail, and try to move them into an auto renewal campaign or subscription. The next element in my list here is tip-ons. Last issue tip-ons are a fairly tried and true part of the renewal series. I think they're very effective because using that copy platform last issue is very powerful on the last issue of their subscription and can get a lot of attention. And we usually include that BRC card so that they can tear it off and renew that way, or go online potentially. And but one thing that we often see is that we've probably sent a number of email or mailed efforts in advance of that last issue, and I'll talk about that with schedule and timing. But this notice, this big last issue tip on the cover, tends to drive people to also send back something that they may have received previously, and you need to take that into consideration when you're analyzing the results of the last issue on sort. Sometimes we use a next to last issue tip on as well, so that can also be effective. And then an alternative on the last issue could be a polybag attachment, what you would call attached mail, where we take an envelope package and say last issue on it. And the big advantage is that we've got a BRE that enables us to drive cash in addition to it. They can fill in a credit card, they can write a check, compared to the BRC card, where that's going to have to be they're going to have to be invoiced for that renewal. Telemarketing is the last element I wanted to touch on in the series. It can be a component of a renewal series. The costs for telemarketing tend to be fairly high, so that's a factor here, usually $30 an hour range. So normally we would not use telemarketing until we had gone through the other elements, the mailed and email elements, and tip-ons tend to have a higher, a better cost per order. So those would tend to go first. But telemarketing, though not in use as much anymore, and that's due to factors like legal restrictions and do not call lists and call screening and all that, make it that much harder, especially in the consumer world, which is primarily what I'm talking about, to get through to those customers on the phone. But the good news with telemarketing is that it's fairly inexpensive and easy to test. So certainly something to think about, and it could work out and be effective component in your series. Auto renewal. So auto renewal is obviously a very effective way to renew somebody having their credit card already. One of the difficulties is if we're marketing offline, trying to get people into an auto renewal mode from offline marketing. Very tough to get them to write in that credit card on an order form or that type of thing. So usually the best approach is to put a URL and get them to go online, and then they can be brought into an auto renewal subscription that way. And then also with email renewals, if you can capture an email at some point for somebody that's in a fixed term mode, they can then be pushed through that by clicking on that link. They can be pushed into an auto renewal order form or renewal portal. Auto renewal disclosure. So here's a sample of auto renewal disclosure. One thing that I like to point out is really best practices is to not have an opt-in or an opt-out box for the customer to check, but rather a forced auto renewal. That seems to work best. It doesn't depress response in any significant way. And then some things that we want to make sure to mention in our auto renewal disclosure is that they will be notified before their card is charged again, that they can cancel any time, that their price may change on subsequent contracts. Privacy is an issue, and legal restrictions that you need to be aware of when you're utilizing auto renewal in your renewal program. It's an area that's getting focused from attorney generals. So Vermont in particular requires an opt-in. That we can't use that forced method that I was showing on the previous slide. So need to be aware of that, and there's ways to deal with that at the fulfillment house with the renewal forms that are being presented. Or more manual ways. States have other requirements, often that there's an email and a phone number, a toll-free phone number for opting out, that sort of thing. So let me move now. I want to touch on the renewal schedule. Here is a sample schedule with 5 mailed efforts and 4 email efforts and a tip-on. And this is the way we would normally structure the schedule and the timing, where we start with an email. I like to start with an email because we can collect some early renewals that way without having to spend money on printing and postage. And then you can see that's at 4.5 months prior to expire. And then the first mailed effort goes out after that in this example at 4 months, another mailed effort at 3 months prior, an email at 2.5. So I've got the emails kind of sprinkled into the series with the mailed efforts. And I've got the last issue tip on expire. And then I go out with a couple of post expire efforts as well in the mail and by email. For a longer series, you can start 5 months or even 6 months before expire, depending on how many efforts make sense for your series, which I'll talk about a little bit. And you can continue further post expire. 2 or 3 months after expire is also can be a good strategy. And for a shorter schedule, fewer efforts, you could start at -3 months or -2 months, for example. This is a very short schedule with a mailed effort at -2 months, a mailed effort at -1 month, and then a tip on. This is a type of schedule that we would use sometimes for some agent sources where the response rates are very low. And so we would shrink the schedule down and change the timing to something like this. Let me now move over to pricing. A few points to mention on setting up pricing in your renewal marketing. Price sensitivity is highest with your new subscribers. It can tend to stay fairly high with your first renewal. And so it's not uncommon that we would hold the intro price with the first renewal. Auto renewal gives you the ability to raise price on newer customers without as much price resistance. So that's another advantage to auto renewal. Price sensitivity tends to diminish each year that a subscriber stays with you and renews. And by the 4th renewal, it's not uncommon for us to see renewal rates in the 80% range and at prices that are close to or double what they paid for their original intro subscription. And so this is a powerful way to structure your pricing. So here's a specific example. If we had a new order at $19.95 for 1 year, let's say, we might have our conversion price stay at $19.95 and then step them up in the second renewal by $5 to $24.95, then step them up another $5, and then step them up another $5. So we've gotten them up to $34.95 over the course of those 4 renewals. And that tends to not have a lot of price resistance, this type of a step-up schedule. Some things to consider when you're thinking about your pricing, your renewal pricing, your website, what price do you have on that, and how is that going to impact what you're promoting to your subscribers for renewals. Your insert cards. Do you have insert cards in the magazine with introductory prices or discounted prices? That's another factor to think about, both in terms of how you structure your renewal pricing schedule, but also what you want your subscriber copies to have in terms of insert card offers and what you want to have on your website that's visible to the public. Because these things can obviously, lower prices can cannibalize your higher paying renewals and generate these unidentified renewals that we talked about when we looked at the reporting. One thing you could think about is language that says introductory offer for new subscribers only when you're doing discounted pricing. And you can enforce it or not enforce it, but it tends to have less people try to get that intro pricing rather than paying the price. You want to try to get to your full rate in about 3 or 4 steps, and you want to make sure that your jumps aren't too large, because that can cause a hit in pricing that is not going to be the best for you. A few more things that you need to think about when setting pricing and offers: your terms. Should you offer 1-year terms, 2-year terms, 3-year terms? All of those. And what we tend to do is offer the longer terms earlier in the series, and sometimes discount that, which I'll show some examples of, and then scale back to fewer options, and even sometimes just a 1-year term option as we get toward the end of the renewal series. Bill me option. This can be worthwhile to have on your renewals. Some people don't like to. They want everybody to pay when they renew, but it's certainly something that can be tested, and it does produce more net orders for some publishers. Credit card options versus asking people to pay by check. Something to think about. Some publishers don't offer credit card payments and do get some depression with that. Generally speaking, it seems to be fine on renewals to offer that as a payment option, as is putting a URL to drive people to the website. That has the added advantage that we can get that credit card and get them into auto renewal. An 800 number phone option for them to call in. We could also get them to pay by credit card, obviously on a phone, and so that can be an advantage. And then including premiums or other incentives in your renewal series is another thing to consider. And we tend to have a lot of success with that, and especially for people that we brought in with a premium offer on a new business source, including a premium in renewals can be very effective and more profitable. So a few more things to consider. I think I touched on a bunch of these already. Discount early bird offers at the beginning of the series. I'll show some samples of that. That tends to be a good strategy. I think I've touched on the rest of these items. So I'll swing over now to some creative and copy, and talk about and show some samples, creative samples, and different copy lines at different points in the series, and creating urgency early in the series, and as we get towards expire, and highlighting savings and a bunch of different things that are there. So this sample is an email early sample, and it has kind of what I was talking about, this special early bird offer where at the beginning of the series you can get a second year for just $5. So it's a way to try to incentivize people to renew early, and it's also a benefit to the publisher to try and get some of those early renewals in before spending money on sending print efforts. This is an example of creating urgency early in the series. We can say this is the last chance for this special 2-year price of $5, and that way, even though this is well in advance of expire, we've been able to create some urgency to get somebody to act. So that can be an effective technique. As we move into more the middle of the series, these efforts produce a high response rate, and I kind of talked about that a little bit when we looked at the renewal data. These earlier efforts should produce your higher responses. There's not a lot of urgency when you're still a few months out, and if you're not doing a special discount like at the very beginning of the series, you know, it's just, you just want to have a renewal notice that is clear messaging, that it's clear that you're trying, that what you're asking for is a renewal, that you want them to continue their subscription. And so copy like "it's time to renew" is very effective, and putting notice on your mail piece is very effective. In this case, for Wooden Boat Magazine, the headline "Keep Wooden Boat Coming." And then as you get closer to expire, the urgency increases. So you definitely want to be using language like expiration notice, your subscription is expiring. And other good copy is that you must act now to avoid missing issues, or this is your last chance to renew and not miss issues. So that's all good copy. When I showed the schedule, the sample schedule, you can see that there's both mailed efforts and emailed efforts in the schedule. So we've got an email effort at expire. So this is subject line expiration notice, and an email goes out at that time, as well as mailed efforts. Other good copy that I like to use that's very effective: only one issue to go. That I talked about that as a tip on as well, but it can be used as a mailed effort, that it's urgent, you only have one more issue left in your subscription. And then last issue notice is very effective. This is your last issue. You must renew to continue receiving any more issues. The tip-ons obviously create urgency and are important. And so they would, one of the most important things on the tip-on is to be very clear with that copy that says last issue. That should be the biggest thing on the piece. Final notice is good copy as well for urgency. This could be at expire, it could be post expire, but telling them that this is their last chance, this is their final notice, this is the last time you will be contacting them about their subscription. It's very powerful. And then, as you saw in the schedule, we have efforts that happen after expire. And so good copy there is "welcome back," or "we want you back." You can see on Red Bull, "we miss you." All that is good for copy, and that can be on your teaser on your outer, and that can be on your order form. And then what we tend to do, which is also very effective, is using including your older expires and ganging them with your direct mail. Once they're 6 months past expire and out to several years, if they're still working, gang them for efficiency with your direct mail, and give them a special envelope or a special version that says "we want you back" or "welcome back" or something like that. And that's an effective way to win back some of those expires. So all part of retention and maximizing the retention rate. BRE. Just want to mention that using a prepaid BRE is the best practices in your renewal mailings. You don't want to use a courtesy. We've always seen that the BRE pays for itself with the additional renewals that come in. The extra cost for the BRE is more than made up for by the additional response. So definitely use the prepaid BRE. And then I just, for the email efforts, just want to touch a little bit on the landing page. Pre-populate your landing page, your name and address fields, to make it as low friction as possible for subscribers to renew. The offer, of course, should match what was presented in an email or in a mail piece. Bring them into your credit card auto renewal for that's going to be your best profitability long term. And if you're driving them to a portal, which a lot of publishers do, rather than to a landing page, if you can have it so that they don't have to log in when they get to that portal, they can go straight through to their renewal offer. Again, obviously the lowest number of clicks and the less friction, the more renewals. So I wanted to touch on gifts. Gifts can be a really, really profitable part of your circulation, gift subscriptions. And when you're renewing gifts, you want to be marketing to the donor and creating your series to ask the donor to renew their gift subscriptions. Gifts have some unique aspects to them that cause them to tend to have higher renewal rates than people renewing their own subscription, because the donor doesn't want to disappoint their recipients, and usually recipients are very nice and say that they love the magazine. So it all works together to produce very good renewal rates, which produces very good profitability. We're using a lot of the same techniques as I talked about for regular renewals, but we generally have a more compressed schedule. So often more like 3 or 4 efforts in the donor renewal series, at least mailed efforts, because we're trying to get those in the period usually between September and December, before Christmas. And they tend to be a little bit more graphically involved and colorful than our regular renewal series, and that tends to work well with the holiday theme. But we can use a lot of the same techniques with urgency, and this is your last chance. The holidays are almost here is good, and then also that they can take care of their gifts easily and quickly, and knock some people off of their shopping list with the donor renewal. That's also good copy. This I wanted to touch on how to determine how many efforts to include in your renewal series. And so the methodology that I use is you want to pull your renewal response data by source and effort to see what you're getting for each effort. Your optimum series will be different for each source. I touched on this a little bit earlier. New business sources tend to get fewer efforts because they respond less well. People that have renewed before tend to get more efforts because they respond better. And then I touched on this a little bit also with agents. Sometimes the renewal series is very short because the response is not very good, and the subscribers often unidentify renewal back through the agent is very common. Then you have to set a criteria for what response and profitability you're looking for. So that could be based on wanting to break even based on promotion and service costs to mail out the issues. It could be break even just on promotion costs because your advertising revenue is covering the other costs for the issues. You could have a minimum profit you want to achieve per sub, or another way that makes sense for some publishers is that you even have a loss, and you set that loss at what it costs you to acquire a new subscriber, replacement cost for that subscription. So here's sort of the way I look at it, the way I calculate the P&L. How much response do I need in the top section if I'm looking to break even just on promotion cost? And you can see I have it broken down into the different categories of renewals, the conversions, the 2-time renewals, the 3-time, the 4-time. You can see our prices are going up in the way that I described in the pricing schedule. and what response, the higher the price, the less response I need to break even, which means I can mail more efforts. And so this is the way I sort of set up that analysis with our revenue, our mailing cost, and our P&L. And so you can see on the conversion source, I need 2.38% to cover my costs and break even. On if I'm getting $34.95 for a subscription on my Forex people, I only need a 1.3%, 1.34%. For if I'm looking to cover promotion and M&D for mailing the issues out, then I need a higher response. You can see it jumps up a lot. In this example, I used 13. I used $1.12 per copy for a 12 issue frequency. So I think it comes out to like $13.50 per subscription to cover the MD. And so you can see that for the conversions now, with a $19.95 offer, I need a 7.89% response on an effort in order to break even. And then at $34.95, I need a 2.21. And then I just go to my renewal by effort data and see if I'm getting those response rates that I need. And you can see in this direct mail source, I'm just getting a 1.3% on the last effort, fifth effort in this case. So I would cut that if that was my goal, was to break even on promotion cost. Insert cards, I'd have to cut that last effort as well. And the agents, you can see I'd have to cut everything except the first effort. It's the only one that's getting enough response to break even. On conversions, I'd have to cut that. That's a 7 effort series, and I'd have to cut that last effort if I wanted to break even. On the renewal 2-time people, I'm getting enough response. I wouldn't have to cut anybody. I'm getting a 4.5% on the last effort. And I think I only needed a 2 or 1.5 to cover my costs. So I could probably add efforts to those long-term people. And so that series could go out to 8 efforts or maybe 9 efforts. So that's the way I would think about it. That's the way I would calculate it and how to optimize it. I think this is my last section, and this is what stock should you use in your renewal marketing campaigns. How do you determine how many outers and forms to use, generic versus custom, that sort of thing. And I'll just go through that quickly. You can use double window outers and laser print your teaser copy to show through, and that can be very cost efficient, especially for smaller circulations. Maybe under 50,000 circulation, versus custom outers for all efforts, which is going to be more costly, but probably will likely drive a better response rate because you get a different look and better teaser, showing graphics, all of that sort of thing. So that's a cost thing. Same with the order forms. You can have a white paper form that is generic, and you just laser print your various messages on there for each effort. That's going to be very cost effective, and especially for smaller circulation. Or on the other end of the spectrum, custom stock for each effort in the series. Print a different renewal form stock with different graphics and teaser copy, and again, probably will generate more response, although not necessarily. And it's certainly going to be more cost effective, but for a larger circulation, it may not be that much more expensive, and it could pay for itself. And then something in the middle, gardening gun, this sample, he uses 3 forms, and he spreads them and rotates them across his efforts, 6 efforts, so alternating different forms every other effort, so people don't get the same form each in a row. They get a different form every other effort. So that's something in the meat, and obviously that the cost there would be less. A way to determine is which way to go. Test it. So here's a sample of how you could lay out that type of a test. You could have all custom stock versus all generic stock versus some hybrid of stock in the middle, where you used some different elements, but not for each effort. and that kind of brings me to my end point here. Just some final thoughts. I was moving quickly to try and get through all of this. It's a lot of ground. And there are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration when you're working on your subscription renewal marketing. One thing that I see a lot of is people get busy with more urgent day-to-day work, and the renewals are kind of on autopilot, and so they don't get the attention that they probably deserve because they really are driving so much profitability and are so critical. So looking at your renewal data is very important to not only come up with ways to improve your results, but also spot problems that could be very costly if they're not addressed in a timely way. So every 2 to 3 months, I think is a good schedule to look at your data. Certainly pay attention to gift renewals because there's a lot of profit to be had there as well. Fine tuning your creative and your copy and your designs can pay off. Small improvements can mean a big increase in profit with renewals, and just in general, understanding your renewals is just critical to understanding your circulation overall and how to best manage your business.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Greg. Lots of great information there. So we're going to get into some Q&A here. So as a reminder to the audience, if you haven't submitted your question, please go ahead and do that in the chat. And then while the questions are coming in, if you guys don't mind, also responding to the poll that's on the screen to let us know how we did. All right, lots of questions, Greg. Okay, so first, what might be considered a good renewal percentage rate? I think early on when you were showing all the sources, and I know they varied, that particular example, I think they ended up with like a 62% overall. What's good? What's considered good?
So for mature publications and overall across all sources of business, sort of a standard renewal rate is about 50%. Okay. So that's a mix of new people that are renewing between 30 and 40 and people that have been with you for several years, which could renew in the 80s or even 90s. That's about average. So 60 overall would be, if you're across all sources, would be good. I would say that that's good.
Okay, excellent. And there's a couple more questions that relate to this, but someone asked if there's a good source for benchmarks, like if people are looking for just industry benchmarks, is there anything out there that you feel like is a good?
There really isn't these days. Nobody has been doing in the past. Years and years ago, Dan Capel used to do it. He used to do an industry survey and benchmark a lot of different areas, direct mail and renewal rates and all sorts of things. Nobody has been doing that. I think it's really valuable to have that, but I don't know of a source that does that currently.
Yeah, same here. Okay, thank you. The Vermont law that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So if a business is exclusively only offering auto renew,
yeah.
Does the just purchasing constitute enough of an opt-in, or is it a little more nuanced than that?
It's more nuanced than that. So there has to be the language that tells them that they're opting into automatic renewal and that their credit card will be used and charged again for the next contract when the subscription comes up for expire. And in Vermont, what differentiates it is that you can't have it just be forced in the way that I showed, where you just tell somebody that they're going to be auto renewed and say that that's good enough. There has to be a checkbox, and if they don't actively check and opt into auto renew, you cannot charge their credit card again in the future, and they cannot be in auto renew. What the fulfillment houses, several of them have done, is they've designed these landing pages which are dynamic, and when you put in your state in the address field as Vermont, that forced auto renew flips to saying check this box if you want to be in auto renew.
Okay, yeah, very helpful to have that, because otherwise I feel like a publisher stuck defaulting their order flow for one state, like
or you know, depending on your scale and if that's sophistication, you can just go in and remove anybody that's in the state of Vermont from auto renew, or you could send them an email and say, would you like to be in our auto renewal program? So there's different ways to handle it, but you know, a dynamic order form is certainly the easiest.
For sure. Okay, thank you. What % of the renewals typically come in after expire that you see?
Very small, but still can be profitable. In the examples I showed, where you those last efforts might produce 1 or 2 or 3% response rates. It's a small percentage. And one of the things I didn't mention, but sort of goes along with that, is that you can often get close to 50% of your renewals off of your first effort. So it's very heavy in the front, especially if your timing and your series is working properly, and then it tends to drop each effort as you move further into the series, and then by the time you're in the post expire part of the series, you tend to be getting just 1, 2, 3, 4% type of response rates.
Okay, thank you. If you only offer forced auto renew, does that tend to decrease your conversion rate for new subs?
It doesn't. So which is why best practices has moved to not in the earlier days with auto renew, we used to have a checkbox, and we would either have it unchecked and people could opt into auto renew, and not that many people did. We could pre-check it, but allow them to uncheck it to opt out of auto renew. And then the third mode is this forced option where there's no checkbox. And what we found through testing is that produced obviously the most auto renewals, because everybody had to be in auto renew, and we didn't see any significant depression in response rate to the offer.
Okay. What's a good churn rate or cancellation for auto renew?
Well, so in the example that I showed, it was a 70% retention. I think that's on the higher side, but again, it really depends on what your front end offer is. So it's just like any type of renewal marketing. New subscribers you're going to retain them at a lower percentage. So, and if you have a very soft offer, which is one of the things that auto renew can be very valuable for, and you see this with social media marketing, especially, where people do these very low priced intro offers. So if you say to somebody, try us for 3 months for $4, and then in the language on the landing page, when they click through, you'll automatically be renewed, and the renewal price might be $30 for a year, right? They start at $4 for 3 months. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of cancels. People are not going to stick at $30 if they started at $4. So you could get 60, 70% cancel on an offer like that. On the flip side, if it's somebody that's been with you before and you've auto renewed them before, their price isn't going up very much at this point, you could retain 80 or 90%. So it's a mix, but normally, sort of overall, I mentioned a 50% to 60% retention overall in a mature file across all of the different categories and sources of subscribers. With auto renewal, you tend to see some number of points higher than that, right? So for every category, you get a little bit of bump in your retention. So if you were going to be getting 50% retention in using your offline and fixed term renewal program, you might be seeing 60% in an auto renewal for the same group of people.
Excellent. Very good to know. Okay, if I can squeeze one more in. Any suggestions on keeping data clean, specifically contact information, addresses? It's kind of a big question.
I'm not totally sure where to go with that. I think it certainly is critically important to keep your data clean, to update your database, or have your fulfillment house update your database constantly. And I think that's one of the values of publishers and publications, is that we're getting that sort of address feedback on a regular basis. If a publication isn't deliverable, we find out about it quickly and it's because we're constantly reaching out, and the same with email, of course, too. You're reaching out constantly with your email messages and getting feedback as to whether that is a deliverable email, whether it's somebody that's opening an email and all of that. But I'm not sure what to say other than yes, keep your data clean. Update it as much as you can. It's certainly worth the investment to update all of that, your undeliverables, your bad addresses, your change of addresses, all of your unsubscribes. I mean, keep that as clean as you possibly can, and invest in that.
Okay, very good. There were some questions that we didn't get to, so please feel free to email Greg directly at greg@fourstringmedia.com. And again, Greg, we thank you so much for your time. We thank you all very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you on a future webinar, an event. Oh, don't forget to look up the annual event that we're having in September. Registration is available at renewed.net. All right, take care, everybody.